Are you sick of the router your ISP sent you either dropping connection, stalling out, or are you a business looking for a solution in order to switch away from some expensive proprietary firewall? Well, this is the video for you. In this one, we are going to be installing OPNsense, a open source community driven routing and firewall platform based on FreeBSD on our very own hardware. This has an Intel N200 in it, so CPU power is going to be fine. 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is kind of overkill for what we're going to be doing. And most important, while not technically required, you're going to have a substantially better time if you have two NICs, one for WAN, one for LAN. So this little box is going to be our firewall. Additionally, one of the reasons these things suck so bad is they try to be everything and they succeed at nothing. This is the router, the switch, the Wi-Fi all in one. Sometimes all in one is really not that great. So just for this little demo setup here, we'll be using a small unmanaged 8-port switch to connect more devices than just one into this thing. And then for Wi-Fi, I just have this small TP-Link access point. And everything here is relatively plug and play. So with that, we need to get into installing OPNsense on our mini PC here. Head over to the OPNsense website, we click on download OPNsense, and then you're going to want to select your system architecture. This is AMD 64. VGA right here is going to be for USB installers. That's what we're going to be doing. And then you can click a mirror location that's a little closer to you. Download that and then flash it onto the USB. If you're on Windows, you could use a tool such as Rufus. If you're on Mac OS or Linux, you can use Etcher or even something like GNOME Disk Utilities, whatever you want to use. And note, before you do boot it up, we have the two NICs right here, the two Ethernet ports. To start, I would just plug in the cable that is going to be your internet connection because it's hard to tell which one wants to be which right away. So if we plug in one, we'll be able to see in just a little bit what it's connected to. And here we go, we're booting into the USB here. All of the services are starting up, and you can see that the LAN port right there has an IP address while the WAN does not. So I'm going to quickly switch over the Ethernet port to the other NIC. And now that we have it plugged into the correct port, we are going to log into the installer. So we're just going to type in installer, and the password is OPNsense, OPNsense, just like that. So here we're going to continue with the default key map, switch this obviously for whatever you want it to be, and we can install this with either ZFS or UFS. I'm going to go UFS. I only have one drive in there. I don't really need the benefits of ZFS in this system, but it is a good option. So let's hit enter, pick our drive. For me, it's going to be the 512 gig one, and we'll go ahead and create that recommended swap partition. And do note that if you have anything else on this machine, it will completely wipe everything. So do back up the important data if you do have any on it. For this, we're going to say yes. And there we go. It's verifying our system. Just about done here. And there we go. It's done. For this, I'm going to confirm and exit because we can set up our password in the actual kind of a wizard walkthrough configurator. So let's continue and reboot our system. So we're going to go ahead and unplug the USB so it doesn't boot into that again. And now I'm going to plug my switch into the other port so I can connect my computer here. And there we go, we seem to be connected. We have our IP address there, 192.168.1, and the login is going to be root with that same password of OPNsense. Hit enter, and then we are going to be into our initial startup configuration. And here we are in the system configuration wizard. So let's just kind of jump through this real quick. Let's hit next. Right here, our host name is OPNsense. You could change that if you'd like to. I'm going to keep it. And it's at opensense.internal. Me, personally, I prefer .lan for my domain. English looks good. Let's change our time zone to whatever time zone you are in. And for a lot of this stuff, we can keep it at default. If you do have reasons to change any specific settings, you could go ahead and do that. You probably know what you're doing. So let's go next. DHCP for this setup is going to be perfect, and it's going to be perfect for a vast majority of setups. Stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. Essentially, when we plug in new machines to this network, it's going to automatically assign IP addresses. So let's keep that, keep all that as is. And here we have something that I am going to want to change because since we're going to be using a service like NetBird to connect to our network from other resources, we don't want to run into an issue where we're connecting from a network to our network that has the same internal IP address scheme because that could add issues. For example, if I kept this as is and I was using a Starbucks Wi-Fi, for example, and they use the 192.168.1 subnet and I tried to connect to an internal resource on my system in the same subnet, there's a conflict there. So I generally like to start this off with 10 because that gives us access to the full 255 that we could select from here. I'll go something like maybe 123. And then this right here is our local subnet. So you can create multiple networks under this subnet right here. Maybe I wanted it to be 100, my default. So 10, 123, 100, 1 is going to be the IP address for OPNsense here. So let's go ahead and hit next. We have our root password, so you will want to change that. Keeping it as OPNsense probably is not the most secure way to go about this. So we can hit next and finish. So we're going to apply that. And since we changed our internal IP address, it's going to disconnect, or at least disconnect from my local machine. And I found the easiest way to give our local machine a new IP address is to simply unplug it and plug it back in from the internet. We could check our system settings to make sure that we have that connection, and you can see our new IP address is 10.123.100.173. So if we connect to 10.123.100.1, and here we are, we have our OPNsense dashboard, a whole bunch of information about our network. We have our gateways, we have our traffic graph, so you can kind of see a live feed of what is going on in your network, all the different services that are running, some firewall live information, and our system. You can see it's hardly using any system memory. It's looking good. Now, before anything, the first thing I want to do is update our system, and let's zoom in a little bit here so we can see everything just a bit better. You see up here, we have OPNsense.LAN, so that domain changed successfully. So let's go under system here, and we want to go to firmware. Under firmware, we're going to want to go to updates. It's always good to update anything after a clean install, because chances are since they built the image, there has been some changes. If I go to status here, we could check for updates. Now it's running that request, and we do have some updates, specifically 47 updates. So there we go. We get a rundown of the full patch notes. So we can hit close, scroll on down, and then click on update. It's going to reboot after. It's a pretty big update, so let's hit OK and let that do what it needs to do. And just like that, our update is complete, so it's going to go ahead and reboot. And just like that, we could go ahead and log back into our system. And what we're going to kind of touch on now is the interfaces and some of the DHCP stuff. So if we head over to, not system, interfaces, we have our LAN and WAN here. We also have assignments. So if we dive into assignments, you can see what we got going on. I only have 2 interfaces on this guy, and they're both already assigned. So that's where you can see this here. And later on, when we install the NetBird plugin, you'll be able to see us assign another interface that isn't technically a physical one. But if I head under LAN here, you can make some configuration changes. Again, I'm not going to dive into absolutely everything because it could get pretty advanced, but you can see the interface is enabled. Right here, we have our static IP configuration. So that's where you could go back and change the IP address if you would like to. And if we head down to services here and then go to our DNS and DHCP here, go over to DHCP ranges, we have our LAN interface, and you could see the actual ranges in which IP addresses will be assigned, or at least that last number there. So by default, the range of 41 to 245 is available, but you can edit this if you want to. For example, if I wanted everything 100 and under not being automatically assigned because I wanted those to go to IoT or even LAN devices, I could set that up. So we would just click on edit right here, and here are our start and end addresses. So let's say I wanted the automatically assigned ones to be anything above 100. I'll change that to 55. And now it will not assign an IP address below that 100 number. And then you have a lot more options. You have the domain, lease time, so on and so forth. But all I would do is click on save, and any new devices that connect will have an IP address within that range. So for example, I have a device right here to extend the functionality of my network, and that is a Wi-Fi access point. Depending on your access point, the way to manage and set this up is going to be a little bit different, but I'm going to plug this in and find or figure out what its IP address is. So I went ahead and plugged it on in. So now if we go down over here to leases, we should be able to see the device, which after a refresh, we can see it right here, and it is within that range that we established. Now do note, if I want to make some changes to this specific device, I could go over here to commands, and we can change some things right here if we would like to, such as changing our host name instead of using our, we could change it to something like TP-Link AP. And then right here, we could actually put in a different IP address. I want to reserve this. So let's do 100, and this can be 10, something like that, something smaller. Out of that range that we just set up. Hit enter. I go ahead and get rid of this IP address here, and you could set up a lot more stuff, but we're just going to save that. So now we have it here within our hosts. If I go back over to leases, you can see it still has that same IP. We need to disconnect the device from the network to reset that IP address. Give it a refresh. Now under leases, we could see its IP address, and the lease type is now static instead of being dynamic, which means it can go ahead and change. Now, if I copy this IP address here, we can then configure the access point. Now, I'm not going to dive into configuring this access point specifically because it's going to be different depending on what you are actually using. But you can see within this access point, I've already set up a network called OPNsense. So for example, if I was to connect to this network on my phone should show up here on OPNsense. And you can see there I am connected. So if I go over here to my leases, give it a little refresh, we can see now connected to the LAN subnet, we have the iPhone. So now at this point, we really do have a functional network that we could go ahead and use. We have Wi-Fi, we have our ranges set up, it's updated, it's ready to go. And now let's go ahead and set up some good old remote connectivity. And we're going to do that with a plugin, specifically the NetBird plugin. Again, do make sure that your system is up to date. I know we already did that, but it's always good just to go dive in here under firmware, updates, and then go ahead and give it a little check. And we can see all of our packages are up to date. So what I could do is head on over to plugins here, and let's search for NetBird. With the search, we're going to show the community plugins, and we can see we have OS NetBird right here. We get some info if we would like to, but I am just going to go ahead and click this plus button to get it installed. So we're going to give that a minute to run and do what it needs to do. And just like that, we are done. So first, let's check here. I'm pretty sure we're going to have to do the connection before we enable the interface. So under VPN here, if we go to NetBird authentication, we can go ahead and input our setup key here. Now we obviously need to go and make a setup key. So let's head over to netbird.io and click on getting started. If you don't have a NetBird account, it's real easy. Supports single sign-on. So you have all of these providers right here. And if it's your first time, it'll take you through an onboarding process to help you kind of get familiar with the platform. But I am just going to continue with a Google account here. So here is one of my NetBird accounts, and we are going to generate a setup key just by going over to setup keys, click on create setup key. And this one is going to be for my OPNsense machine. I'm only going to use the one key for now. I already have some groups on here, but we're going to create one specifically for OPNsense. So OPNsense. So then when I add the setup key to OPNsense, it's automatically going to be in the OPNsense group. So let's create the setup key, give it a copy, and then head back over to the authentication here and drop this on in. Here you could change the management URL if you are self-hosting it, but for now we could go ahead and click on connect. So now that's saved in there, but it's still not going to be connected all the way because we need to go over to settings, check the little enable box, click apply, and head back over to authentication. And let's click connect again, see if we have some success. And there we go, just like that, NetBird is connected. And if I go and look over here at our setup keys, give this a refresh, you can see the key is used. And if I head over to peers, we can see OPNsense.LAN right there in our dashboard. Now, since we have a successful connection, we need to assign the interface for WireGuard. WireGuard is one of the key backing technologies that makes NetBird work. So if we head back over here and we go to the interfaces, we're going to go to assignments. And then right here, we have a new device, WT0. This device is going to be NetBird, just like so. Let's go ahead and click on add. And then over here under interfaces, we have NetBird. So let's go ahead and open that up. And then right here under enable, let's enable the interface. And then of course, we'll prevent interface removal. And then from there, we could click on save. Now, again, this is WireGuard. So if you're going to be using NetBird here under VPN, don't configure this because this is being overtaken by NetBird here. But under interfaces, let's go ahead and apply these changes. And now I can show you where the firewall stuff is because we're going to want to create an access policy for that NetBird interface. Right under here, under Firewall, I can then go to Rules and then NetBird. And here we have a default rule, but what we're going to want to do is create a new one. And for this, we're going to basically make an all-encompassing allow all rule for NetBird because this is going to be managed over on the NetBird side using their groups and access control policies, as opposed to here in OPNsense. So let's go ahead and click on add. The action is going to be pass, the interface is going to be NetBird, direction is in, IPv4 looks good, protocol and source are both going to stay at any. Do know if you did want to configure this a little bit, you could. For example, under source, we can have the source being NetBird addresses, NetBird networks, so on, but for this, any is going to be fine. And for the description, we could say something such as allow all on NetBird. And then we could click on save. So now we have that firewall rule. Let's apply those changes. So we should be good to go when it comes to actually using this and accessing this. Make sure that this rule is on top so it has the priority here. And that's really about it. Of course, you could go way in depth. For example, if you want to set up some LAN firewall rules, you could go ahead and do that. If you were to go and set up VLANs, which we're not going to have time to dive into in this video, this is where you would set up access between various VLANs, how you want that to work. But what we're going to do now real quick is set up a NetBird network. I'm going to go ahead and grab my IP address here. Let's give that a copy and then head back over to NetBird. And we're going to go under networks. The reason we're doing this is so we can use our OPNsense machine as a routing peer. So if there's other servers or devices behind OPNsense, we can access all of those remotely without having to actually install NetBird on every single device. So all we do is add a network here. This is going to be my OPNsense network. Add that network, and we're going to add a resource. And for this one, it's going to be my OPNsense subnet. And for the IP address, we're going to drop that on in. We're going to go with 0/24, so it encompasses the entire range of IP addresses that can be in that subnet. And for the destination group, I am going to call this OPNsense subnet, just like that. So now it is part of that group. Oh, sunbet. My bad. We'll keep it for now. Let's add the resource and create a policy. So now we have our OPNsense sunbet right here. We're going to set up access to this subnet. So we're going to give a user group access. So I'm going to give myself IT admins. That is my user group. Under users, you go ahead and add and change that however you would like. And I'll go ahead and allow VPSs to access this because that's what we'll use to test. Enable policy, continue. We're going to skip posture checks for now, but they're super cool. You can set it so certain processes have to be running on a computer, certain operating systems, certain geographical locations, a bunch of different security stuff you could do right here. We'll continue. Subnet access policy works perfect, and we'll add that policy. And now the routing peer. We only have one peer, but it's going to be our routing peer. And that is our OPNsense machine. So we'll select that, click on continue. All this looks good. We'll add the routing peer, and there we go. Now I'm going to add another machine to this network just so we can actually test accessing machines that aren't OPNsense. I have a little Zima board here with Ubuntu server on it, so that's what we'll go ahead and use. So now that that's plugged in, let's find its IP address. So we can head over to services again, DHCP, leases, and look, there it is, Ubuntu, and it's at the IP address of 103. Real quick, let's go ahead and make a setup key for this VPS that I'm going to connect here. We're going to put this in the group VPS, just like that. And let's create that setup key. Now here, let's install NetBird and then connect to it. And here we are. So let's make that a little bit bigger so we can see what's going on. And then first run this curl command to install NetBird within Linux. And then we can head over here and copy the setup key with the NetBird up command. And once this is done, here we go. NetBird's been installed and we can run it. Boop. And it should take just a couple seconds. You can see we're now connected. So if I go over here, the setup key's been used. And then under peers, I have the VPS there. Now, if I head over to my access control policies, the only policy we have right now is our subnet policy, but let's make another one so we could directly access OPNsense from our VPS here. Normally, you wouldn't do this from a VPS. You'd want to do like your administrator account, but for testing purposes, I'm testing from an offsite machine, which is the VPS. So I'm going to go VPS with full access to OPNsense. And I say full access, you can do granular control of access with ports, port ranges, so on. But for this example, I'm just going to go all, and this is VPS to OPN, add that policy. So now if I go over here into our remote server and I do a NetBird status dash D, we should be able to see just about everything. So here is our actual peer for our VPS. But if I scroll up, we will see the peer details for OPNsense right here. We have our NetBird IP address. We have all the connection details. We have events right here. We have our relay connections. So we should be able to ping the NetBird IP address directly. So if I go over here to OPNsense, copy this, let's give it a little ping to see if we can establish connection, which it looks like we are able to connect directly to OPNsense from our remote server. So let's get rid of this. And if we scroll up here, we also have our network. So if I tried to ping OPNsense directly to the network IP address, that should work as well. So if I ping that, there we go. And now, what was that IP address for our Ubuntu server right here? So if I copy that, see if we have a connection there. And it looks like we do. Very, very nice. Now, this video is getting a little lengthy, so do subscribe, ring that bell so you can see the next video that we do revolving around OPNsense, in which we will cover DNS names, setting up something like Pi-hole, maybe playing around in Unbound DNS. It's going to be a fun time. We're going to be able to use local domain names, DNS names from anywhere in the world to access our local network. So do subscribe, and I hope to see you soon. Have a great day, and goodbye.